In 1989, a newlywed couple drove into Death Valley to celebrate their honeymoon. 5 years later, a geologist made a discovery in the sand that would turn their disappearance into one of the desert's most haunting mysteries. The Jeep was buried under 6 feet of sand, perfectly preserved, as if someone had carefully hidden it. But it was what investigators found inside that made no sense. A map carved into the dashboard, pointing to coordinates that don't exist. Their names were Michael and Claire Donovan. They'd met 2 years earlier at a photography exhibit in San Francisco, married in a small ceremony overlooking the bay, and decided to skip the traditional beach resort honeymoon. Michael was an amateur desert photographer obsessed with capturing the raw beauty of Death Valley's shifting dunes. Claire, a high school biology teacher with a love for star-filled skies, had always dreamed of sleeping under the Milky Way far from city lights. On June 14, 1989, they loaded their white 1987 Jeep Wrangler with camping gear, water jugs, a Coleman stove, and Michael's Nikon camera equipment. They told Claire's sister they'd be back in 5 days. They planned to camp near Mesquite Flat, photograph sunrise over the dunes, and explore some of the less traveled areas of the park. They never came back, but before they vanished, someone saw them. On June 15, 1989, a gas station attendant in Beatty, Nevada, a small town on the edge of Death Valley, remembered the couple. His name was Roy Haskins, a 62-year-old who'd worked the same station for 30 years. He'd seen thousands of tourists pass through, but Michael and Claire stuck in his memory. They were happy, Roy would tell investigators later. Real happy. The kind of newlyweds who couldn't stop touching each other, you know? Holding hands while they picked out snacks. The guy bought a map, asked me about good spots for sunrise photos. I told him Mesquite Flat, told him to stick to the main roads. It gets real easy to get turned around out there. Roy remembered something else, a detail that wouldn't seem important until years later. There was another vehicle at the pumps, a dark pickup truck, Nevada plates, 2 men inside. They were watching the couple, not in a creepy way, just noticing them. When the couple left, the truck left right after, same direction. Roy didn't think much of it at the time. Death Valley attracted all kinds. Tourists, photographers, geology students, prospectors still chasing dreams of silver and gold. 2 men in a truck wasn't unusual. But when the Donovans vanished, Roy called the tip line. He gave descriptions. Both men in their 40s, one with a beard. The truck was a Chevy, maybe 85 or 86, dark blue or black. Rangers wrote it down, added it to the file. They never found the truck. When Claire's sister called the park rangers on June 20th, search teams were dispatched immediately. Death Valley in summer is unforgiving. Daytime temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Dehydration can kill in hours. The Park Service took every disappearance seriously. Search helicopters combed the area for 3 days. Ground teams checked every known campsite, trail, and access road. They found nothing. No Jeep, no tire tracks. No sign that Michael and Claire Donovan had ever entered the park at all. The case went cold. Claire's sister, Angela Morrison, never accepted that they were just gone. She called the Park Service every week for the first 6 months, then every month, then every few months. She hired a private investigator in 1990, a former LAPD detective named Frank Delgado, who specialized in missing persons cases. Delgado spent 2 weeks in Death Valley, retracing the couple's likely route, interviewing rangers, checking campsite logs. He came up empty. But he told Angela something that haunted her. "The desert doesn't hide people this well," he said. "Cars break down, people get lost, they die of heat exposure, but we find them. Bodies, vehicles, something. Your sister and her husband? It's like they drove into a hole in the world." Angela started having dreams. In them, Claire was calling for help, but Angela couldn't find her. She'd wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. Her husband suggested therapy. She went twice, then stopped. How do you explain to a therapist that you can feel your sister out there, still waiting? Michael's parents, Robert and Susan Donovan, handled it differently. Robert, a retired electrical engineer, became obsessed with maps. He covered the walls of his study with topographic charts of Death Valley, marking every canyon, every dry wash, every forgotten mining road. He developed theories. Maybe they'd driven into an old mine shaft. Maybe flash flooding had buried them. Maybe they'd encountered a criminal fleeing into the desert. Susan just wanted closure. She organized the memorial service, packed up their apartment, donated their belongings to charity. But she kept Michael's cameras. All of them. She couldn't bring herself to let those go. The investigation officially closed in March 1991. The file went into storage. The Rangers moved on to new cases. But Tom Cabrera didn't forget. He kept a photograph of Michael and Claire on his desk, the one from their wedding announcement that Angela had provided. Every few months, he'd pull out the file, read through the witness statements, study the maps. He knew he was missing something. He just didn't know what. Families never stop hoping, but after a year with no leads, even the most optimistic investigators begin to move on. Michael's parents held a memorial service. Claire's sister packed up their apartment. The desert, it seemed, had swallowed them without a trace. But the desert keeps secrets, and sometimes it gives them back. In May 1994, a geologist named Dr. Raymond Holt was conducting a routine survey near the southern edge of the Mesquite Flat Dunes. He was mapping sediment layers for a research paper on wind erosion patterns. The work was methodical, slow, and often tedious. He'd been walking transects with a ground-penetrating radar unit marking anomalies in the sand. Holt had been working in Death Valley for 15 years. He'd published papers on sand migration patterns, ancient lake beds, climate change evidence locked in sediment layers. The desert was his laboratory, his obsession. He knew its moods, its dangers, its secret. That morning, May 12, 1994, started like any other. Temperature already pushing 90 degrees by 8 a.m. Holt was working alone. His graduate assistant had called in sick. He didn't mind. He preferred the solitude. He was running the GPR unit across a section of dunes that had shifted dramatically over the winter. Wind patterns had changed, exposing older sand layers. It was perfect for his research. The unit beeped. A solid return. Large metallic mass. Deep. Holt marked it with a flag, made a note in his field journal, and moved on. Probably old mining equipment, he thought. The area had been prospected heavily in the early 1900s. People abandoned all kinds of junk in the desert, but something nagged at him. The return signature was too clean, too uniform. Mining equipment would show up as scattered fragments, corroded metal, irregular shape. This was different. This was intact. He came back the next day with excavation tools. That's when the radar lit up. 6 feet below the surface, there was something large, something metallic, something that didn't belong. Holt marked the coordinates and returned the next day with a small excavation team. They dug carefully, expecting perhaps an old mining cart or abandoned equipment from the 1920s borax operation. What they uncovered was far stranger. It was a white Jeep Wrangler, buried vertically nose down in the sand. The vehicle was in near-perfect condition. No rust, no sun damage. The paint was still intact. It looked like it had been carefully lowered into a pit and then covered, almost ceremonially. Holt immediately contacted the Park Service. Within hours, investigators were on site. They ran the plate. The Jeep belonged to Michael and Claire Donovan. The moment the VIN came back, Cabrera's phone rang. He was at home, off duty, watching a baseball game. The voice on the other end was breathless. "Tom, it's David. We found them, the Donovan Jeep. You need to get out here, now." Cabrera didn't remember the drive. One moment he was hanging up the phone, the next he was standing at the excavation site, staring at the white roof of the Jeep emerging from the sand. His hands were shaking. A crowd had gathered. Park rangers, county sheriff's deputies, a forensics team from Las Vegas. Someone had erected a canopy for shade. Generator-powered lights were being set up. This was now a potential crime scene. Cabrera pushed through the crowd. He needed to see it up close. The Jeep was angled almost vertically, nose down. The rear bumper was only about 2 feet below the current sand surface, but the front end was buried deep. The burial method was precise, deliberate. A forensics tech named Marissa Chen was already photographing the scene. She looked up when Cabrera approached. "This is the weirdest recovery I've ever worked," she said. "Whoever buried this thing didn't just push sand over it. They dug a pit, lowered the vehicle in, then backfilled. That takes time, equipment, planning. Any sign of the occupant? Not yet. We're bringing in cadaver dogs, but..." She gestured at the endless dunes. "If they're out here, it could take weeks." Cabrera nodded. He was already thinking ahead. If the Jeep was here, buried like this, then Michael and Claire had to be somewhere nearby. People don't bury vehicles and then walk into the desert to die. There had to be more. "I want to be here when you open it," he said. Chen nodded. "Figured you would." The discovery made regional news, then national headlines. After 5 years, the missing honeymoon couple's vehicle had been found in one of the most bizarre circumstances imaginable. But where were Michael and Claire? The media circus arrived within hours. News vans from Las Vegas, Los Angeles, even a national network crew. The story had everything journalists craved: young love, tragic disappearance, bizarre discovery, unanswered question. Cabrera found himself giving impromptu press conferences at the site, trying to manage information while the investigation was still active. "Can you confirm the vehicle belonged to the missing couple?" "Yes, we've confirmed the registration." "Is this now a homicide investigation?" "We're treating it as a missing persons case with suspicious circumstances." "Do you have any theories about how the Jeep ended up buried?" "We're exploring all possibility." He hated the question, hated the camera, hated that Michael and Claire's tragedy was being turned into entertainment. But he understood the fascination. He felt it too. A Jeep buried nose down, perfectly preserved, 5 years after disappearing. It defied logic. Marissa Chen pulled him aside during a break in the media briefing. "Tom, we need to process that vehicle before this turns into a circus. I'm recommending we transport it to the lab in Vegas. We can do a proper forensic workup there, away from the camera." "How long will that take?" "To move it? We'll need a flatbed, a crane, probably 6 hours to secure it properly. To process it? Days, maybe weeks." "Do it. I want to know everything. Every fingerprint, every fiber, every molecule of evidence that Jeep can give us." Chen nodded and walked back to her team. Cabrera watched the excavation continue. Workers were carefully exposing the rest of the vehicle, documenting every layer of sand, every detail of the burial. And he couldn't shake the feeling that Michael and Claire were close, watching, waiting to be found. Inside the Jeep, investigators found their camping gear still neatly packed in the back. The cooler held dried-out remains of sandwiches. A sleeping bag was rolled and strapped to the roof rack. Michael's camera bag sat on the passenger seat, film still inside. Everything suggested they'd simply parked and walked away. Chen processed the interior with meticulous care. She photographed every item, every surface, every shadow. The Jeep had been sealed tight. The windows were up, the doors locked. Very little sand had gotten inside. On the back seat, she found a journal. Not Michael's. This one belonged to Claire. It was a small leather-bound book, the kind sold in museum gift shops. The last entry was dated June 14th, 1989, the day they'd entered the park. Chen read it aloud, her voice quiet in the desert heat. "Michael says we're going to see the most beautiful sunrise tomorrow. I can't wait. I've never felt this happy, this free. We're going to fill our lives with adventures like this, just the two of us, forever." The word forever was underlined twice. Cabrera had to walk away. He stood at the edge of the excavation site, staring out at the dunes, jaw clenched. After 5 years, reading those words felt like a gut punch. When he came back, Chen had moved to the front of the Jeep. He was examining the dashboard with a handheld UV light, checking for fingerprints, bodily fluids, anything that might tell them what happened. That's when she saw the carving. "Tom," she called, "you need to see this." But it was the dashboard that stopped everyone cold. Carved into the molded plastic, directly above the steering wheel, was a crude map. It had been scratched with something sharp, a knife maybe, or a rock. The lines were deliberate, not random. There were landmarks, a series of peaks, a dry lake bed, a set of parallel lines that might represent a road or a ridge, and in the center, a set of coordinates: 37 degrees, 14 minutes, 59 seconds north, 116 degrees, 49 minutes, 12 seconds west. One of the investigators, a ranger named Tom Cabrera, who'd worked the original search, pulled out a topographic map and plotted the numbers. He stared at the result for a long moment. Then he looked up at his colleague. "These coordinates," he said slowly, "are inside Nevada test site, restricted military zone. No public access. And according to this map, they're pointing to a location that's just empty desert. There's nothing there." The coordinates haunted Cabrera. He went home that night, but he couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with maps spread out, a bottle of whiskey he didn't drink, and a growing sense of dread. Why the test site? What were Michael and Claire trying to say? He started building a timeline. June 14th, couple enters park. June 15th, last confirmed sighting at Beatty gas station. June 20th, reported missing. June 22nd to 24th, search conducted, nothing found. May 1994, Jeep discovered, coordinates revealed. 5 years. The Jeep had been buried for 5 years. Cabrera called Angela Morrison. It was past midnight, but he knew she'd be awake. She always was. "Angela, it's Tom Cabrera. We found the Jeep." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Are they?" "We don't know yet, but there's something else. Something I need to ask you. Did Michael or Claire ever mention the Nevada test site? Any interest in it? Any reason they'd go near it?" "No. Why would they?" Michael was into natural landscapes, not military zones. "Did they know anyone who worked there? Anyone with clearance?" "Not that I know of." "Tom, what's going on?" He told her about the carved map, the coordinates, the impossible location. Angela listened in silence. When he finished, she said something that made his blood run cold. "Michael had a habit. When we were kids, when he wanted to hide something important, he'd draw maps. Treasure maps, he called them. He'd bury things in the backyard and make us solve riddles to find them. He loved puzzles. Code." Cabrera sat up straighter. "You think the coordinates are a code?" "I don't know. But Michael wouldn't just carve random numbers into his dashboard. If he left those coordinates, they mean something. If you're hooked on stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries that'll keep you up at night. The Nevada Test Site. For those unfamiliar, it's a roughly 1,360 square mile expanse of desert northwest of Las Vegas, used by the U.S. government since 1951 for nuclear weapons testing. Above-ground tests ended in 1963, but underground detonations continued into the 1990s. The entire area is fenced, patrolled, and absolutely off-limits to civilians. Why would Michael and Claire carve coordinates pointing to a forbidden military zone into their dashboard? Investigators had 3 theories. Theory 1. They'd gotten lost, stumbled near the test site boundary, and tried to mark their location for rescuers. But that didn't explain how the Jeep ended up buried 6 feet under sand, perfectly preserved, with no bodies inside. Theory 2. They'd encountered someone else in the desert. Someone who'd done something to them and hidden the vehicle. But who buries a Jeep vertically? And why carve a map that points to a restricted area? Theory 3. The map wasn't a location. It was a message. Tom Cabrera became obsessed with Theory 3. He'd been haunted by the Donovan case since 1989. He'd led search teams through 115-degree heat, flown grid patterns until his eyes ached, interviewed everyone who'd seen the couple before they vanished. He felt responsible. Now, 5 years later, he had a second chance. He requested access to the Nevada test site. It took 6 weeks of paperwork, clearances, and bureaucratic wrangling, but eventually he got approval for a 1-day escorted visit to the coordinate. Getting clearance wasn't just bureaucratic, it was invasive. Cabrera had to submit to background checks, sign non-disclosure agreements, sit through security briefings. The Department of Energy, which managed the test site, didn't let people in casually. During those 6 weeks, Cabrera did something else. He tracked down Dr. Raymond Holt. They met at a diner in Furnace Creek. Holt was curious. He'd been following the news coverage of the Donovan case. "I've been thinking about the burial," Holt said, stirring his coffee. "The way that Jeep was positioned. It bothers me." "How so?" "The sand in that area moves fast. Dunes migrate, sometimes several feet per year depending on wind patterns. For that Jeep to stay buried and undiscovered for 5 years, whoever buried it had to understand sand dynamics. They had to know it would stay hidden. You think someone with geology training did this? Or someone who knows the desert intimately? A prospector, maybe. Someone who spent decades out here." Cabrera made note. "Another angle to investigate." Holt leaned forward. "There's something else. When I was excavating, I found this." He pulled a small plastic bag from his jacket pocket. Inside was a piece of fabric, sun-faded but intact. It was caught on the undercarriage of the Jeep. "Looks like canvas. The kind used for old mining tarps or prospector's gear." Cabrera took the bag, held it up to the light. The fabric was stained, worn, definitely old. "Could have been there for decades," Holt said. "Or it could be from whoever moved the Jeep. Thought you should have it." On July 22, 1994, Cabrera, 2 federal agents, and a military escort drove into the test site in a government SUV. The landscape was alien. Craters from old detonations, patches of fused glass called trinitite, warning signs every few hundred yards. They reached the coordinates just before noon. The test site was like another planet. Cabrera had seen photos, but being there was different. The craters were massive, some hundreds of feet across, perfectly circular, like meteor impact. The ground in places was glass, fused by the heat of atomic detonations. They passed buildings with warning, radiation hazard, no entry. They saw old vehicles, test equipment, observation towers, all frozen in time, abandoned. The military escort, a man named Lieutenant Marcus Wade, drove in silence. He'd been assigned to the test site for 3 years and had the weary demeanor of someone who'd seen things he couldn't talk about. When they stopped at the coordinates, Wade checked his dosimeter. Radiation here is background level. Safe. Cabrera stepped out. The heat was crushing. Over 110 degrees, and it was only noon. He walked the grid, checked for disturbances in the ground, looked for footprints, tire tracks, anything. Nothing, but something felt wrong. The coordinates were precise. Someone had carved them carefully. Michael Donovan, dying of thirst, had used his last strength to leave this message. It couldn't be meaningless. That's when Cabrera spotted the ridge. There was nothing there, just flat, hard-packed desert. No structure, no marker, no sign that anyone had ever set foot in that spot. Cabrera walked the area in widening circles. He used a metal detector. He dug test holes. He found nothing. Frustrated, he stood at the exact coordinate point and looked around. The test site was eerily silent. No birds, no insects, just heat shimmer and endless beige horizon. Then he noticed something. To the southwest, barely visible through the haze, there was a low ridge, and on that ridge, a shape. Angular, unnatural. He pointed. What's that? The military escort checked his map. Old observation bunker, Cold War era. Decommissioned. It's about 2 miles off. Can we check it? Not on the itinerary. Cabrera pressed. He'd come all this way. The escort made a radio call, received grudging permission. They drove toward the ridge. The bunker was a concrete shell half buried in sand, with a rusted metal door hanging off its hinges. Graffiti covered the walls, dates from the 1960s, initials, crude drawing. It had clearly been abandoned for decades. The bunker smelled like decay and chemicals. The walls were stained with something dark, oil maybe, or old coolant. Graffiti covered every surface, layer upon layer of names and dates. But the names on the back wall were different, fresh, or at least fresher than the rest. Michael, Claire. They'd been scratched with a sharp object, maybe a rock. The letters were uneven, carved by someone weak, someone dying. Below the names, another line. If you find this, tell them we tried. Cabrera felt tears sting his eyes. He radioed for backup, for forensics, for cadaver dog. This was it. This was where they'd died. Wade stood at the entrance looking uncomfortable. We need to document this properly. I'll call it in. While they waited, Cabrera searched the bunker. He found the backpack in the corner, partially buried. He opened it with gloved hands. Michael's wallet, Claire's driver's license, a set of keys, the notebook. He read the first entry, then the second, then the third. With each line, the horror of what happened became clearer. They'd gotten lost. Not in the main park, but on the margins, the unmarked roads, the places where boundaries blurred. They'd run out of gas in the worst possible spot. And then they'd found the bunker. But inside, on the back wall, someone had scratched 2 names, Michael, Claire. Cabrera's heart slammed against his ribs. He pulled out a flashlight, swept the beam across the space. The bunker was small, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, empty except for debris, old cables, a broken chair, shattered glass, and in the corner, partially covered by sand that had blown in through cracks, a backpack. Cabrera knelt, brushed off the sand. The pack was canvas, stained but intact. Inside, a wallet with Michael Donovan's driver's license, a small notebook, a set of car keys. He opened the notebook with trembling hands. The first page was dated June 16, 1989, 2 days after the couple had entered the park. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places. We got lost, took a wrong turn off Daylight Pass, ended up on some unmarked road, ran out of gas. It's so hot. Claire isn't doing well. I tried to walk out for help, but everything looks the same. We're conserving water. Someone will find us. They have to. The next entry, same day, later. Saw headlights in the distance. Tried to signal. They didn't stop. Or didn't see us. Claire is barely talking. I don't know what to do. June 17, 1989. We walked. Left the Jeep. Had to. Found this bunker. Claire says she saw something last night. Lights in the sky. She thinks we're near the test site. I think she's delirious. There's a fence line about a mile east. Signs say no trespassing, deadly force authorized. We can't cross. We're trapped between the park and a military zone. June 18, 1989. Claire is unconscious. I gave her the last of the water. I tried to get help. I walked to the fence. I shouted. No one came. I'm going to carve our location into the Jeep dashboard. If someone finds the car, they'll know where we are. I'll mark the coordinates of this bunker. I'll hide the Jeep so scavengers don't strip it. Please, someone find this. The final entry was barely legible. I love you, Claire. I'm sorry. But there was more in the notebook. Pages Cabrera almost missed, stuck together with dried sweat and sand. June 19, 1989. Michael's handwriting, even shakier. Claire died this morning. I held her. She wasn't in pain at the end, just tired. She said she loved me. She said she wasn't scared. I buried her behind the bunker. I used my hands. It took hours. I don't have much time left. I can feel it. My vision is blurry. My head feels like it's splitting open. But I need to do one more thing. I need to mark the Jeep. If I can make it back there, I can carve our location. Someone will find it. Someone has to. The next page was a crude map, drawn in pencil. It showed the bunker, the fence line, and a dotted path back to where the Jeep had been. The distance, approximately 3.8 miles. Michael Donovan, dying of dehydration, had walked nearly 4 miles through the desert to carve a message into his dashboard. Cabrera's throat tightened. He could barely breathe. The forensics team arrived within 2 hours. Cadaver dogs confirmed human remains behind the bunker. The excavation began. The notebook dropped from Cabrera's hand. He stood, breathless, piecing it together. Michael and Claire had taken a wrong turn, ended up on a service road near the test site boundary, ran out of gas in the worst possible location, too far from the main park roads for search teams to find them, too close to restricted land to cross for help. They'd walked to the bunker. Michael had tried to save Claire, and when he realized they were going to die, he'd done the only thing he could think of. He'd gone back to the Jeep, carved coordinates into the dashboard, and buried the vehicle in sand to preserve it, hoping someone would eventually find it and follow the map to the bunker. But why bury it? One of the federal agents, a woman named Lisa Ortiz, had been quietly examining the bunker. She called out, "Cabrera, you need to see this." Outside, behind the bunker, there was a small collapsed section of the structure. Ortiz was crouched next to it, brushing away sand. Underneath were 2 shallow graves. They'd been dug by hand, probably with a flat rock or piece of debris. The graves were side by side. Cabrera didn't need confirmation. He knew. Michael had buried Claire when she died. Then he'd buried himself next to her. The graves were shallow, just deep enough to cover the body. Michael had used a flat piece of concrete, broken off from the bunker wall. His hands, when they found him, were shredded. Cuts, blisters, sand embedded deep in the wound. He dug with his bare hands. The medical examiner, Dr. Aisha Kwan, performed the autopsies in Las Vegas. Her report was clinical, detached, but even she included a note at the end. Subject M. Donovan showed signs of extreme physical exertion in the hours before death. Muscle tissue breakdown consistent with overexertion. Dehydration was advanced, likely unable to produce sweat in final hours. Cause of death: hyperthermic shock complicated by severe dehydration. Time of death estimated June 19th, late afternoon or early evening. Of note, subject's hands show evidence of repetitive trauma, consistent with digging and carving hard surfaces. The level of determination required to inflict this degree of self-injury while in a dying state is extraordinary. Cabrera read the report 3 times. Extraordinary. That was the word she'd used. Michael Donovan had loved his wife so much that he'd destroyed himself trying to save her, and when he couldn't, he'd made sure she wouldn't be forgotten. The medical examiner's report, filed weeks later, confirmed it. Both bodies showed signs of severe dehydration and heat stroke. Claire had died first, likely on June 18th. Michael had survived another day, maybe two. Alone, in the bunker, waiting for rescue that never came. He'd used the last of his strength to bury his wife, then laid down beside her. And before he did, he'd walked back to the Jeep, miles through the desert, dying of thirst, to carve that map, to leave a message, to make sure someone, someday, would find them. But here's the part that still haunts investigators. Cabrera's interview with Ed Voss took place over the phone, but he recorded it. He wanted every word preserved. "Walk me through what happened," Cabrera said. "Step by step." Voss sighed. "June 17th, maybe 18th. I don't remember the exact date. We were on routine patrol, southwest perimeter. Found a Jeep parked about half a mile inside the boundary. Civilian vehicle. No one around. What did you do?" Protocol was to report it, but my supervisor said to handle it quietly. We were in the middle of something. A test series, classified. He didn't want media attention, didn't want civilians nosing around. So we decided to move it. Move it where? Back into the park. We figured we'd bury it, make it look like it got stuck in the sand. Tourists get stuck all the time. How did you bury it? We had a front loader, part of the site equipment. Dug a pit, pushed the Jeep in nose first, covered it. Took maybe 2 hours. And you didn't search the area? Didn't think about who might have left the Jeep? Voss's voice grew defensive. We searched. We walked a grid. We didn't find anyone. We thought they'd hitched a ride out, reported the vehicle stolen, whatever. We didn't think— He stopped. Didn't think what? Didn't think anyone had died. The Jeep was buried vertically, nose down, 6 feet under sand. A feat that would require equipment, manpower, and hours of work. Michael Donovan was alone, dying, and had no tools. So who buried the Jeep? Cabrera interviewed the military personnel who'd been stationed at the test site in June 1989. Most had retired or transferred, but he found one man, a former security contractor named Ed Voss, who remembered something. "Yeah," Voss said slowly when Cabrera called. "I remember June '89. We had a situation. Some guys on patrol found a vehicle near the southwest perimeter. Civilian Jeep. White. It was in a weird spot, like someone had driven it off-road and ditched it. Protocol was to report it, but, look, things were different back then. The site was still active. We had orders to keep things quiet. No media, no public incident. What did you do with the Jeep?" Voss hesitated. "We moved it, buried it, made it disappear. Figured it was some joyrider or lost tourist. Didn't think much of it. Did you see anyone? 2 people? A couple?" "No, just the Jeep. We searched the area. Didn't find anyone. We thought they'd walked out, got picked up somewhere. There was a map carved into the dashboard. Did you see it?" Another pause. "Yeah, we saw it. Didn't know what it meant. Just looked like random scratches." Cabrera's voice was cold. "It was coordinates. To a bunker 2 miles away. 2 people died there." The line went silent. "We didn't know," Voss finally said. "I swear, we didn't know." The military had buried the Jeep to cover up a breach. Michael and Claire, lost and desperate, had stumbled too close to a restricted zone. Instead of helping them, security had erased the evidence and moved on. By the time searchers were looking for the Donovans, the Jeep was already 6 feet under sand, and the couple was dead in a bunker no one thought to check. The full scope of what happened took months to piece together. Investigators from multiple agencies, Park Service, Department of Energy, FBI, conducted interviews, reviewed test site logs, analyzed decades-old security footage. What emerged was a portrait of bureaucratic failure and Cold War paranoia. In June 1989, the Nevada test site was still conducting underground nuclear tests. Security was tight. Protocols were rigid. Any civilian breach, intentional or accidental, was treated as a potential espionage threat. When test site security found the Jeep on June 17th, they followed standard operating procedure: contain, document, remove. No one thought to check if the vehicle's occupants were nearby. No one radioed the Park Service to ask if anyone had been reported missing. They simply made the Jeep disappear. A Department of Energy internal investigation, completed in early 1995, found procedural deficiencies and lack of interagency communication. It recommended policy changes, additional training, and better coordination with local law enforcement. But the report was classified. The public never saw it. What the public did see was a grieving family demanding answers, a community outraged by government negligence, and two young people who died because no one thought to look beyond their own protocol. Angela Morrison became the face of that outrage. She gave interviews. She testified before congressional committees. She refused to let her sister's death be quietly swept aside. They died alone, Angela said in one particularly emotional hearing, in a concrete bunker in the middle of nowhere, and the people who could have saved them were a phone call away. One phone call. That's all it would have taken. The lawsuits followed. Wrongful death, negligence, emotional distress. The government fought them for 2 years before quietly settling. The story broke in late 1994. Public outrage followed. Investigations were launched. Policies were changed. The families of Michael and Claire Donovan filed lawsuits that were quietly settled out of court, but none of it brought them back. Tom Cabrera retired from the Park Service 2 years later. He never stopped thinking about the case. In interviews, he always said the same thing. Michael Donovan loved his wife so much that he walked miles through the desert, dying, just to leave a message. He wanted her to be found. He wanted her to go home. That kind of love doesn't just disappear, it echoes. The bunker was eventually demolished. The graves were exhumed, and Michael and Claire were buried together in San Francisco, overlooking the bay where they'd gotten married. The demolition took place in November 1995. A small crew from the Department of Energy brought in excavators and systematically reduced the bunker to rubble. The stated reason was structural instability, but everyone knew the real motive: erase the evidence, remove the reminder. Cabrera wasn't invited to witness it. He heard about it secondhand from a colleague who'd seen the demolition scheduled in an internal memo. He drove out anyway, stood at the perimeter fence, watching dust rise as the concrete walls came down. It felt wrong. That bunker was the last place Michael and Claire had been alive. It deserved to be remembered, not erased. After the crews left, after the rubble was hauled away and the site was graded flat, there was nothing, just empty desert. No marker, no memorial, no indication that two people had died there. Angela Morrison tried to get permission to place a memorial plaque. Her request was denied. The test site didn't allow civilian monuments on restricted land. So she did the next best thing. She worked with the Park Service to install a memorial at the Mesquite Flat parking area, a simple bronze plaque mounted on a stone cairn, in memory of Michael and Claire Donovan, lost in the desert, June 1989. May their love and courage never be forgotten. The dedication ceremony was small. Just family, a few rangers, some journalists. Cabrera gave a brief speech. Michael and Claire came to Death Valley looking for beauty, he said. They found it, but they also found something else, the harsh reality that nature doesn't care about our plans, our dreams, our love. The desert takes what it wants, but it couldn't take their story. That belongs to us now, and we have a responsibility to tell it. He paused, looking out at the dunes where the Jeep had been buried. So, remember them, not as victims, not as a cautionary tale, but as two people who loved each other enough to face death together. That's rare. That's worth honoring. The plaque still stands today. Tourists stop to read it, to take photos, to leave flowers. Some have never heard the full story. Others have followed every detail. But everyone who reads those words feels something, a connection, a sadness, a recognition that love and tragedy are often inseparable. But the mystery didn't end there. In 2003, a hiker found something in the Mesquite Flat dune, a small metal box buried about a foot under the sand near the spot where the Jeep had been discovered. Inside the box was a photograph. It showed Michael and Claire, smiling, sitting on the hood of their Jeep. The sun was setting behind them. They looked happy. On the back of the photo, in Michael's handwriting, Day 1, best decision we ever made. No one knows why the box was buried there. No one knows who buried it. Michael couldn't have. He was already at the bunker when the Jeep was moved. Some people think it was one of the military contractors, overcome with guilt years later, leaving a quiet memorial. Others believe it was something else, a message, a reminder. that even in the harshest, most unforgiving places on earth, love leaves a mark. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes, if you listen carefully, it whispers them back. And the story of Michael and Claire Donovan, the couple who vanished on their honeymoon and left behind a map carved in desperation, remains one of Death Valley's most haunting mysteries. Not because of what happened, but because of what it reveals about the lengths we'll go to protect the people we love, even when hope is gone, even when the desert has already won. The lawsuits were settled in 1996. The terms were sealed, but Angela Morrison used part of the money to establish a foundation, the Michael and Claire Donovan Memorial Fund for Desert Safety. It provides GPS trackers, emergency beacons, and survival training for people planning to camp in remote areas. They died because they got lost, Angela said at the fund's launch event, and because no one was looking in the right place. I can't bring them back, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. Tom Cabrera attended the event. He didn't speak, just stood in the back, listening. Afterward, Angela approached him. "Thank you," she said, "for never giving up." Cabrera shook his head. "I gave up for 5 years. If Dr. Holt hadn't found that Jeep, but he did, and you solved it. You brought them home." Cabrera nodded, but the guilt never left. He retired in 1996, moved to Oregon, tried to forget, but every June he'd get a call from Angela. They'd talk for a few minutes, share memories of Michael and Claire, of the search, of the ending. "Do you think they knew?" Angela asked one. "That someone would find them?" "Michael knew," Cabrera said. "That's why he carved the map. He believed in people. He believed someone would care enough to look, and he was right." Yeah, he was right. The photograph found in 2003, the one in the buried metal box, remained unexplained. The Park Service investigated, but no one claimed responsibility. Some rangers whispered that it was haunted, that the desert itself had preserved the image, a ghost story made real. Others believed it was Ed Voss or one of the other contractors leaving a silent apology. But Cabrera had a different theory. He never shared it publicly, but he told Angela once, late at night, over the phone. "I think Michael buried it," he said, "before he died. One last thing. He wanted to leave proof that they'd been happy, that their honeymoon, even if it ended in tragedy, had started with joy. He wanted the world to see them the way they were, together, smiling, free." Angela was quiet for a long time. "I like that," she finally said. "I like thinking he did that." "So do I. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not how they died, but how they lived, how much they loved, how far Michael walked, how deep he dug, how carefully he carved, all in the hope that someone, someday, would find them and know their story. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes those secrets are love letters. If stories like this one move you, tales of mystery, love, and the unknown, make sure you hit subscribe. There are more out there, and some of them are even stranger than this.